Marrying teens to hold off a religious war? Throughout the history of royal marriage, this was all just par for the course. War, religion, and the desire for power and legacy are woven across the ages when observing royal unions. Yet so many include arranged marriages, unwilling participants, and relationships rife with infidelity and abuse, some notoriously more so than others. Welcome to History on Fleek. Today we examine 5 of the worst royal marriages in history. Providing a successor is historically the most important function of a royal marriage. It's an issue that has presented itself time and time again, age for age. So it's quite the spanner in the works when the royal you marry is nicknamed the impotent. Henry IV of Castile and Joan of Portugal married in 1455, with Henry's problem known to the point of a nickname. One of the last late medieval kings, it's understood from medical records that Henry had a defect of his genital organ, meaning he couldn't complete the sexual act. His first marriage to Blanche II of Navarre was annulled after 13 years on the grounds of Henry's impotence. Oh, and did I mention? They were cousins. Ew. Yep, they were cousins. Just gonna let that settle with you for a minute. Henry blamed his impotence on a curse. Others pointed to his use of prostitutes. It ain't a curse, it's the clap. Either way, it left the second Queen of Castile with the impossible task of bearing him children. What followed is possibly the first artificial insemination some 3 centuries before the first recorded case. Navigated around prohibitions of the Catholic Church and using Jewish physicians off the books, on February 28, 1462, Joan de Portugal was successfully inseminated by special practices. No medical records exist, and rumors were abound Joan had conducted an affair to conceive. She soon faced banishment from the royal court and went to live with one of Henry's bishops. In 1468, the royal couple were divorced. No good deed goes unpunished, huh? Another straight-up contender for the worst royal marriage of all history was George I and Sophia Dorothea. For starters, the marriage was a marriage of state, a proto-power couple, if you will, joining significant nobility of different states and power centers. Arranged by Sophia's father, the marriage took place in 1682 when George was Prince Elector of Hanover, and despite its political intention, was a disaster from the start. Sophia and her mother had huge misgivings about the union that Sophia's father only ignored. Both George I and his mother felt Sophia Dorothea was beneath him and lacked the manners or birth for such a union. George treated Sophia badly. The couple were renowned for loud, brutal arguments, he, in particular, lambasting her lack of etiquette. Then, the affairs came. Presumably from living in an unhappy marriage renowned for its violent conflicts, Sophia began an affair with a Swedish count. A friend since childhood, Sophia began a sexual relationship with Philip von Königsmarck in 1692, exchanging hundreds of love letters that can be found at the Lund University in Sweden to this day. George was no better, having his own royal mistress, Melusine von der Schulenburg, with whom he bore no less than 3 illegitimate children. Yet, evidently, George saw this differently. Following his divorce from Sophia in December 1694, he soon had her jailed for life. Quite tragically, Sophia spent the next 32 years imprisoned till her death. Confined to Alden House, she spent her last years writing to her former husband, begging for forgiveness and to see her children again. Her letters were never answered. Staggeringly, George I went on to be King of Great Britain and Ireland, despite this well-known scandal. Want to hear about a marriage full of lies, deceit, lust, and murder? Look no further than Queen Isabella of France and Edward II. A 20-year sovereign and King of England, Edward II married Isabella of France in something of a considered political move. At the time of Edward's reign, France was under the rule of Philip IV, and the 2 crowns had ongoing unresolved tensions. Edward and Philip's daughter Isabella were married in 1308 in a hope of quelling such friction. As you might be able to guess, this is absolutely not what happened. Edward caused all kinds of outrage with the special treatment and patronage he afforded Piers Gaveston. The favorite nobleman had joined the king in 1300, but the nature of his relationship with Edward was fodder for the rumor mill. Sworn brothers, some would say. Best of friends, some would say. Lovers is what many said. The closeness between the two made the French nobility so uncomfortable, Edward was forced to exile Gaveston. Perhaps Edward didn't quite learn his lesson, as in 1312, he soon took on another favorite in Hugh le Despencer, causing a series of revolts across England. None of this went unnoticed by Isabella. In 1325, with their marriage hanging by a thread, Isabella was sent to her homeland France for diplomatic purposes. Hugh Despencer the Younger was a man of many enemies, and one of them was Isabella of France. It's believed on her trip to France, Isabella began an affair with the powerful English lord, Roger Mortimer. Returning from France, Isabella was convinced she could no longer work with Edward politically and led a revolt against the crown. In 1326, Isabella led a small army across England and deposed her husband. She sat as regent on behalf of her youngest son, Edward III, for 4 years before Edward III came of age, and Isabella was imprisoned. Maybe the most novel way to end a marriage ever: lead an army against your betrothed. Not all tales of royal marriage collapse are dripping with power lust and treachery. Some are about troubled people getting lost in their struggles. Christian VII was king of Denmark-Norway from 1766 until 1808 upon his death. Christian was considerably troubled with mental health issues, from a childhood blighted by an alcoholic father and a tyrannical and physically abusive tutor, the Count of Reventlow. At 17, Christian ascended to the throne and took the hand of Princess Caroline Matilda of Great Britain in 1776, herself just 15 years old. The union and any potential love it could have brought Christian was not to be, with Christian's mental health plummeting. Barely a year into the marriage, he began an affair with Stovlet Catherine, a famous courtesan, and his psyche worsened. Christian suffered from hallucinations, paranoia, and at points, self-harm. Christian's treatment of Caroline was cold and uninterested. As the king's well-being unfolded, his physicians were given increasing power. By 1769, his primary physician, Johann Friedrich Struensee, became a de facto ruler due to the king's incapacity. To add to these troubles, the charming physician soon caught the eye of the queen, and they began an affair. Eyes around the court soon took notice, particularly with Struensee's constant pushing for reforms, which the queen only supported. Christian's stepmother, Juliana Maria, plotted against the queen and her lover-physician. Struensee was soon executed, and Caroline Matilda was divorced and banished to Lower Saxony. In 1775, at just 23, Queen Matilda died of scarlet fever, a figure memorialized in scandal. Christian, on the other hand, had plays and films written about him. If there is one lesson to learn from the history of hopeless royal marriage, maybe don't hope for major reformation, peace, or unification of religious sects off the back of one. Just a thought. Princess of the Valois dynasty, Margaret of Valois, took the hand of Henry III of Navarre in 1572. Unfortunately for these two lovebirds, France was in an entrenched time of civil religious war. The French religious wars from 1562 to 1598 took between 2 to 4 million lives as Catholics and Protestants fought for the religious hegemony of France. Like so many royal unions of the Middle Ages, Henry III of Navarre and Margaret of Valois' marriage was a political maneuver. It was believed that the union could help to reconcile the void between Catholics and Protestants across France. In front of family members from either side of the divide, they were wedded on the 18th of August, 1572 at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Yet this snapshot of reconciliation did not heal the country. Just 6 days later, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre unfolded, as Protestants across the country were assassinated and assaulted by Catholic mobs. Beginning on the night of the 23rd of August, 1572, the massacre only escalated the conflict. King Charles IX demanded that the heads roll of notable Protestants throughout France. In the weeks that followed, up to 30,000 people were killed in the violence. As for the newlyweds, Henry was a Protestant and took their side during the wars. Margaret was a Catholic and sided with them. Surprise, surprise, their marriage never really recovered and was annulled in 1599. I think we can see the pattern here, bar some exceptions. Royal marriages of the Middle Ages, The worse the king acts, the more liable the queen is for punishment. If there's something you'd like to hear on notorious royal marriages, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, this is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.